Hello, everyone. This is Coach Clayton, and this is my Women's Empowerment Interview episode. And today we have Gina as our guest to discuss her journey of overcoming personal and professional obstacles in her life. Hey, Gina, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Now, Gina, just to give you a little idea about my video podcast, I'm an accountability coach, and I felt like with so much going on, I wanted to start a video podcast that really inspired women, something that like a woman can go to or, plug into each week to really inspire them and give them positive information. Yeah, so that's why I started the podcast.
I love that. That is so important right now. And in my experience over the last 2 years has been women really need that kind of resource. So good on you.
Thank you. Now, Gina, your background really intrigued me. Can you tell us a little bit about one of your personal obstacles that you had to overcome?
Oh yeah, I have plenty. So one of the biggest ones that I have had to overcome is being a survivor of childhood sexual assault. And that's something that is a life-term journey. It's not something that is ever really over. Healing isn't linear, and I find that as I progress into my life, new facets of that experience come up for me. So that is definitely the first of many that I have had to overcome. And in a strange way, I'm grateful for it because it has largely informed my current career path. So,
yeah. One key point that I really think is important to understand, especially when it comes to sexual assault or sexual molestation, is that it's not your fault. Because with so many women, the reason why we stay imprisoned and want to keep it private is because we blame ourselves. And no, it is not your fault. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us. What was some of the things that you did to overcome that trauma of sexual assault?
I mean, I've done a lot of things, but I think one of the most helpful, well, a few of the most helpful things, one was taking space from the person who was responsible for causing that harm, which was difficult because they're a family member of mine. So I kind of had to estrange myself from my family of origin, which is a blessing and curse. In their absence, I have built a wonderful, supportive, present, safe community around myself. So that is one of the things I did. I have also been in therapies like consistently since I was 6 years old. So I get a lot of feedback from mental health professionals, which has been tremendously helpful. And I think another thing for me, honestly, has been my practice in object manipulation and juggling. I know that's kind of strange and out of left field, but a lot of that practice has to do with like the belief of self, right? Like putting your mind to something and achieving that goal. And then that's not even touching on the aspect of like wielding fire, right? Like it's kind of incredibly powerful experience of wielding this thing to create art and healing that is also capable of destruction really helped me see kind of like the contrast in my experience and helped me understand that you really can't have the light without the darkness.
Oh, yes. You cannot have the light without the darkness. I love that. I absolutely love that. One thing that I wanted to bring into the forefront of what you said is that you had to distance yourself, which made it hard because it's family. One thing that I will continuously say is that a lot of people will think that, oh, it's usually a stranger. No, it's usually a family member or a close family friend that is doing the sexual assault or the sexual molestation. So it's very important for parents to realize this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't realize. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
crazy figure. It's over 70% of
Yeah.
reported sexual crimes are perpetrated by a friend, a
Mhm.
family member, an employer, or like somebody inside of
Yes.
like a professional realm.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a part of like the rape myth narrative that creates this kind of schism between women experiencing trauma and recognizing that what they experienced was trauma, which expands the abyss between experiencing something traumatic and getting help. Um,
Exactly.
so, I'm really, really passionate about talking to people about these kinds of things and, just making information accessible to people, because I think an issue inside of the realm of like sexual violence prevention is people use these like really heady academic words that people just don't understand. And so they're not relating to it, which makes it not helpful. Um, yeah.
That's
So
right.
it's a dark statistic, but it is true. And I hope that the more awareness that's raised around it will increase people's likelihood to engage preventative education and training, which there is a ton of out there for.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of another obstacle that I think that you had entered onto the form was generational poverty.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, full disclosure, I haven't escaped generational poverty. I'm still very much working to pay bills and, but I feel like my mindset has shifted around such that I feel worthy of the life that I deserve, which is full of ease and peace and stability and reverence for the things that I have in my life versus this constant desire for more.
Yes.
And I genuinely, like I said, haven't escaped it yet, but I really believe that that mindset shift is a big part in starting to get out of it, because, I went from fist fighting over ravioli with my sisters
Yeah.
as a child, and, going to school hungry. Like my little sister would like pass out from lack of nutrients because she was on like ADHD medication during the school day, so she couldn't eat, and then get home and there's no, like, it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
um and so, after living a life like that, like as a childhood sexual
Mhm.
trauma survivor, in poverty, undiagnosed autistic, there's a lot that goes into that kind of translates to like, you deserve this life of suffering, or like,
Mhm.
you are not worthy of comfort and stability. And so, shifting that mindset has been huge for me, because has allowed for me to ask for what I'm worth, not just
Exactly.
in the context of the work that we're doing with CCI, but in every area of my life.
Mhm. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I noticed that you said, I am still working through it, but what has changed is my mindset. And a lot of times that's the trigger that creates the change, is because you will constantly seek ways to change. So I love that. I absolutely do, Gina. Yeah. So tell me about, so you said that you had a late diagnosed autistic.
Mhm.
Do you mind discussing that or?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super passionate. I really want, like, it's Autism Awareness Month. Yay.
Mhm.
And I want to shift the narrative to autism acceptance, right? Because like,
Yes.
autism exists. We're past the point of like wondering. But what we need to work on is accepting people who are autistic as they are.
Mhm.
And so I obviously have been autistic all of my life. And that has become increasingly apparent as I look back at pictures of me in groups of people or
Mhm.
individually. And I was diagnosed in July of last year, and
Wow. Okay.
I'm 30, so a late diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it has been just such a transformative experience for me, because I just had no idea. I mean, I do have anxiety. I have numerous conditions that have been diagnosed, but most of them go back to me being autistic and not receiving the support that I needed, such that, you know, it resulted in me having obsessive compulsive disorder or a chronic anxiety condition or chronic depression because I was overstimulated or understimulated or feeling socially isolated. And yeah, it's getting that diagnosis has been tremendously helpful for me because I've been able to find coping mechanisms that actually work for me.
Wow.
You know, when I thought I was having a panic attack, what was actually going on is I was overstimulated and needed to reduce input in order for my nervous system to regulate.
Okay.
So those are like radically different things, right? Like one is I'm
Yes.
going to go breathe and listen to some calming music. And the other one is I'm going to go wrap myself in a weighted blanket with earplugs in for 15 minutes.
Mm,
So that's been tremendous. And then, you know, also realizing how deeply impactful that diagnosis would have been when I was younger, because it would have helped me avoid all sorts of trauma. You know,
mhm.
I didn't realize that I was not understanding the social cues people were picking up or putting down, which meant that I was putting myself in like dangerous situations. And that persisted until about 4 years ago, when the last time I was sexually assaulted, because I just again didn't realize the circumstance I was putting myself in at 29, right? Or, you know,
Yeah.
26. So it really cannot be overstated how important it is that, like, if you think something is off, if you're feeling like everybody has this social script that I just don't have and I don't understand,
Okay.
it could be worth looking into, because not everybody feels that way.
Mhm.
And when you live a life as an undiagnosed autist, that becomes the narrative, to try and like understand what's going on. But yeah, I am just so grateful to have this and so grateful to be finding my community and finding resources that work for me, because it really, the diagnosis matters.
It does. It does. Can you tell me a little bit more about when you say social script? What do you mean by that? Just for someone that's thinking, maybe that's me. Maybe I should get seek diagnosis or have someone look to see if I am autistic.
Yeah, sure. And I'll disclose that I am not a mental health professional. I'm just a
Exactly.
person
This is
living my life.
yes, yes. You're speaking based on your experience only.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. But so like the social script that I mean is something where it particularly shows up for me in professional settings or in group settings. And I really avoid talking in group settings that are more than 3 people because it is very uncomfortable for me. But essentially, you can imagine that you're standing in a group of like 5 to 6 people having like a wonderful group conversation.
Yeah.
And the social script looks like knowing when it's your turn to talk. So like people are having this group conversation and, you know, you have a thought to add to it and you're just not sure like when to add it in, whether that be like interrupting a person or like waiting until there's a gap in the conversation and, you know, and then inserting it there. But it's a generalized confusion around when to do that.
Okay.
Has been my experience. I've also had experiences of, you know, I'm like overexcitable, and a lot of women actually have that kind of symptom of autism, which is one of the reasons why women are largely undiagnosed, is because the autism criteria was developed for and by men.
Okay.
So that is why women are largely undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. And one of the reasons is because we oftentimes feel our emotions very deeply. We're like the happy criers, you know, like I'm like so excited, so easily excitable. And, you know, that can be difficult too in professional settings because there's this expectation that people are like prim and proper and like cool and composed and like not excited. And we're like, yeah, we'll have our people talk to your people and get back to you. And I
Yeah.
just do not have that energy in me. I'm like a golden retriever. I am stoked. I believe we can do it. Like absolutely excited. And I find myself in professional settings where people are feeding into this kind of social script. having to like physically contain myself, right? Like I'm like holding my knees or like clasping my hands and like resisting like being excited because I recognize that these people are feeding into this social script. And so, if you have things like that that happen, could be worth looking into.
Okay, okay. I like that. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Yes. So you mentioned that you have a business. Is it your business is consent education? Tell me a little bit about consent education and infrastructure development.
Sure. So my company is Consent Culture Initiative,
Okay.
and we founded in 2015.
Mhm.
And we created ourselves for the National Flow Arts Festival circuit. As I said before, I'm like a fire spinner and juggler. I've like produced festivals for that community as well. But we created CCI for this community because the last time I was sexually assaulted, it was by somebody who was peripherally a part of that community. And I recognized how dangerous it is for people to be in our community or even peripherally in our community because of the implied power that a person has by displaying skill in the context of practicing an art form. And so I created CCI originally as a report intake system and norm change platform where we're like putting posters up and having community conversations. And that was great. Well, it was all right. But we have done a lot of learning and a lot of sitting with the work that we're doing, and especially in the past couple of years, and have really moved away from this kind of like carceral punitive response that requires people to make decisions that are isolating to people. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest one is that like we don't want to respond to harm. We want to avoid harm. We don't want people to hurt anymore. I'm not trying to make a business model off of the guarantee that people are going to continue being hurt and I will be there to help them. That is not okay for me. I don't want people to hurt the way that I have hurt. I want people to not hurt the way that I've hurt. So we majoritively focus on education, infrastructure development in the way of like entry forms. So like when you go to a festival or an event, they're like, here's your photo waiver, your liability waiver. We write consent and harassment policies so people are fully informed of what is the expectation in this space and what will happen if you fail to meet those expectations. And we do that. Some people are like, oh, that's kind of carceral, but I don't feel that it is safe for people to have these conversations and expect safety if there isn't an infrastructural support system for them to do that within. So we do that. We still do community discussions because that's super important. But like I said, we really are focused in the prevention aspect of the work that we're doing now. Now we do provide response services, but we're hoping to kind of like separate those two aspects of the work we're doing.
Okay. And so your business, is it geared more towards like the events, or is it that anyone can join it for input? How does it work?
Anybody can join CCI. So we created ourselves for festivals, and we cater to event producers and staff, like we do power dynamics education and that kind of stuff. But we also educate patrons, and that's why we offer forums and do the Consent HQ, which is kind of like an information booth for people to like come through and just have a casual conversation if they want. As well as, I think I already said education, but we provide education, these kinds of things. And we were the first organization to create like a staff training program for civilian security on site. Such that people are able to find them. They wear like vests and identifying items so that if somebody is feeling uncomfortable, like say you're at a bar at a festival and this guy is like following you around and you're not quite sure if you're safe, you find one of those people wearing the vest and they escort you back to camp or whatever you need in that moment. So we are taking that outside of the festivals and developing a consent action team chapter program where you can take our training and exist in your daily life with that knowledge that you are more equipped to intervene and support someone if they disclose to you about an act of violence they've experienced. Our hope is that we will be able to expand that programming into local bars and venues and community spaces, because a lot of these spaces have a similar kind of social structure as festivals where, you know, there's clearly people who are in real power, but there's lots of implied power positions there, like the bartender, the security guy, the door guy, the sound guy, and these kinds of implied roles of power exist in all captive communities. So that's really what we want to work in. Yeah.
So how can we find you online?
Well, you can find us by searching Consent Culture Initiative. We're pretty much the only people that show up if you type that in. You can find us on Instagram by that handle. You can find us on TikTok and Facebook by that handle. We also have a website that is consentcultureinitiative.com. And we also have a Twitter. It's a little underused, but you can check it out if you like. It's culture_consent is our handle if you want to take a look. And yeah, if you're interested in joining our team or becoming a part of our consent action team chapter network, you can go to our website and click join the team in the top right corner of the web page, and that will take you to a little form that you can fill out and tell us about yourself so we can get in touch.
Nice, very nice. And there's a huge need for that. So I'm happy that that's available. Definitely happy for that.
Thank you. We're really excited about it. I feel like, you know, there's been a lot of like gatekeeping in academia and in helping professions, which, you know, is funny because it feeds right into capitalism, which is a big part of why all this stuff happens to all of us. So, you know, I'm hoping to allow people the opportunity to have access to this information so that they can make the change they want to see without having to get a bachelor's or a master's in some kind of relevant degree so they can, you know, be in debt and then have to take, like, there's just, it's such a huge issue in my mind. So thank you. I'm glad you agree.
So in closing, what advice would you give a woman right now that's watching you, that's going through a trial or tribulation and feels like, you know, sort of like no hope, but yeah, let's say no hope. What advice would you give them?
Well, I would first say that it is important to honor the place that you're at. Feeling that lack of hope is the first step to finding it again, as hard as that is. You know, I spent years running from the pain and suffering that I experienced in my upbringing, and it wasn't until I really sat with my feeling of disconnection and social isolation and not understanding these social constructs and how scared I felt to be inside of this community I invested a decade of my life in. It was that darkness that allowed me to see the light, right? Because the light was pretty dim. The light was pretty dim. And I feel like when we're feeling hopeless, that it's because that light has softened so much that we're not really sure where it is. But that's why I say, like, sitting in that darkness, and of course, as well as you're able, you know, like, don't sit in it forever. But in my opinion, it's really important to sit with that feeling of hopelessness, to really find where that hopelessness comes from, which I see as that place of action. You know, I felt hopeless about creating safety in my community. I felt hopeless about the fact that there was no report intake system for this national festival production company. I felt hopeless that there was really no recourse or plan of action for us to hold this person accountable And that is where I found the inspiration to build the life that I'm living now. So that is definitely the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is be loud about it. Be loud about your pain. Be loud about your suffering. What helps keep us in this place is this social isolation, is this feeling alone, feeling like we are abnormal and not okay because we're having these feelings. And I just cannot say enough how fulfilling and enriched my life has become now that I am really sharing my experience authentically without this fear of people judging me because they think I'm autistic and they have these kinds of like internalized ableist scripts that are running for them, or that they see survivors as like weak and meek and all of these things. I really think that our pain is our strength. And for those of us who carry a lot of pain, we are stronger than even we realize.
Absolutely. Gina, thank you, thank you, thank you for taking the time out of your day to chat with me. Thank you so much. So powerful. Thank you.
It has been such a pleasure, and I cannot wait to see what you do. I will absolutely be following your platforms, and I really hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.